ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ. So Santhiya ji, we're very fortunate to be sitting here today, and I'm very fortunate to have been given some time here by apne yani ji hage a apne Singh hage a who've done this kirpa upon me to let me be here today, put forward a few of my vichar, and as you can see the presentation here, beyond the mind. Because Santhiya ji, the thing is, you can come towards, you can look at Sikh philosophy, you can look at Sikhi through any angle you want. You can start from any concept and you can dive in. But before we start this talk, just that people know, I think most people will know, but some people may not. So we're going to be starting off with a Mangal. Mangal na shuru karange, and I'll be pronouncing that. And the reason why a Mangal is done in the first place is because it concentrates the mind. It makes you ready for understanding, listening and interpreting Gurbani and Katha itself. Even you'll find many people, when they start reading Gurbani, they start off with the Mahamangal being Satnam Sri Vaheguru. Why is that done? To concentrate the mind so we can actually understand, so we can actually be able to interpret what the Guru is saying. So I'll be starting off with that. स्वस्ति श्री गुरु नानको विजयते वंदे गुरुं नानकं गोप्योऽहं श्री गुरु नानकेन सततं श्री नानकायो नमः. नान्यो मे श्री गुरु नानकादि गुरुवरः श्री नानकस्यास्म्यहं दासः सद्गुरु नानके मम रतिस्त्रायस्व मां नानक. दंडौत बंधन अनेक बार सर्व कला समरथ डोलन ते राखो प्रभु नानक दे कर हाथ. ना हो जति सती नहीं पड़या मूर्ख मुगदा जन्म भया. प्रणवत नानक तिन की सरना जिन तू नाही बिसरया. मुकं करोति वाचालं पंगुं लंघयते गिरिं यत्कृपा तमहं वन्दे परमानंद माधवम्. मूक उचर शास्त्र खट पिंग गिरन चढ़ जाय. अंध लिखै बधरो सुनै जाओ काल कृपा कराय. वाहिगुरु जी का खालसा वाहिगुरु जी की फतेह. So Santhiya ji, as you can see from the title behind, Beyond the Mind, and with Maharaji's kripa that is also rhymed. Okay, beyond the mind. The reason why I chose this specifically was because the mind is something that which all of us have. ठीक है, होगा एक दो बंदे होंगे which may not even have a mind, है ना, कोई पता नहीं. But one thing that we can agree on is that everyone has a mind, है ना? And with that mind we interpret, we see the world. In fact, the whole world which we see is based upon our mind. So उदे करके there's a very great उदाहरण, a very great shlok, a pangati, a verse which is used by many, ke mano drishyam idam sarvam, that everything which is being seen by our eyes is something which is seen by the mind, which is created by the mind. The world that we see is nothing but a projection of our own thoughts, of our own interpretation, of our own mind. Apne furniya ਜੋ ਸਾਡੇ ਫੁਰਨੇ ਹਨ ਸਾਧ ਸੰਗਤ ਜੀ, based upon that, ਉਹਦੇ ਆਧਾਰ ਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਸੰਸਾਰ ਨੂੰ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਹਾਂ. People have their biases. People are attracted to a certain thing. People are opposed against a certain thing. So the mind is something which is very important when it comes towards the way that we see life, the way that we see the world. Everything at the end of the day comes back to the mind. And again, even experiences, even all the experiences that we have, all these experiences are rooted in the mind. ਜਿੰਨੇ ਵੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਸੰਸਾਰ ਦਾ ਅਨੁਭਵ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਇਹ ਸਾਰਾ ਅਨੁਭਵ ਮਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ. ਮਨ ਅਨੁਭਵ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ. We see someone walking, we see this happen, that happen. All of this is interpreted by the mind. All of this comes back to the mind. ਉਹਦੇ ਕਰਕੇ ਮੈਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਮਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਸੋਚਿਆ, I thought in my mind to use this title Beyond the Mind. And also a shout out goes to Gyani Jeevanpal Singh, because this is a plagiarism. I've taken this title, from them. Unhone ek talk ਕੀਤੀ ਸੀ ਵਿਦਿਆਲੇ ਵਿੱਚ, and I just said koi nahi ਇਹਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਲੈਂਦੇ ਆ. Take the same topic, but again I'm going to approach it from a different angle. ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੀ ਖਟ ਸੰਪਤੀ ਬਾਰੇ. They talked about the different qualifications needed to walk upon this path, to be adhikari, to be somebody who is able, who is worthy to walk on this path. But today I'll be, again, talking about the same topic but from a different angle. So, Sadh Sangat Ji, another thing which inspired me to actually go through this topic of Beyond the Mind was a quote from a very famous text, from a very famous Granth, which we find to be studied by many great institutions in the past. We find that many Gursikhs would go to certain institutions, Taksala ch jande si, Bunga vich jande si. And as we can see, Gyani ji here as well, who've created this amazing Shaheedi Bunga, where they're teaching students about Gurbani, about Sangeet, about all these different limbs of Gurbani, all these different limbs of Gurmat itself. So back in those days, Sadhu Sangat Ji, we find that in these taksals, in these institutions, to further understand, to further widen our understanding, to widen the arth of Gurbani, to understand Gurbani truly. For that reason, ਅਸੀਂ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਸਮਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, in those times, there were many texts which were taught. And they were taught because they help in understanding, they help in doing katha, in trying to explain Gurbani, and they also help deepen our understanding of Gurbani. And one of those granths is a granth called Vichar Sagar. And when we look at the name itself, Vichar Sagar, Vichar means inquiry. So an ocean, Sagar means an ocean, so an ocean of inquiry. And when they begin this text, when they start to begin to describe Paramatma, they start to describe the nature of God, they say, Mati na lakhain, jihi mati lakhain. They say the nature of God is that Mati na lakhain, that we can't understand God by the mind. No matter what we try, ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੀ ਬੁੱਧੀ ਨੂੰ ਵਰਤ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਆਪਣੇ ਮਤੀ ਨੂੰ ਵਰਤ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਜਿੰਨਾ ਮਰਜ਼ੀ. We can exhaust our mind, we can exhaust our intellect and try to actually understand God. But again, Akal Purkh is beyond it. It's beyond the mind. So they say that which cannot be known by the mind, mati na lakhain. Mati means the mind, it means the intellect. They say that which cannot be known, lakhain, lakhana pav, janana. That which cannot be known by the mind, but which makes the mind known, which knows the mind. So this is something which inspired me to actually, come back to the same idea of beyond the mind, because Sadhu Sangat Ji, whenever we think of Akal Purkh, we have to understand it in this understanding that Akal Purkh is beyond our mind. And again, they say that which cannot be known by the mind, but which makes the mind known. And this is a very deep vichar. You might just think, oh yeah, beyond the mind. But what it means is that in reality, we see this mind. Whenever we're walking Jivahar, that this mind itself is conscious. But when we look at the drishti of Gurbani, when we look at the view of Gurbani, we see that in reality this consciousness, when we see people speaking, we see the sense of consciousness, that someone knows themselves and can know something else other than themselves. That is called consciousness. ਚੇਤਨਤਾ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਜੋ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਨੂੰ ਜਾਣਦਾ ਹੋਵੇ ਤੇ ਦੂਸਰੇ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਜਾਣ ਸਕਦਾ ਹੋਵੇ, ਉਹਨੂੰ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਚੇਤਨ. But this mind, Gurbani describes, is material, but it appears to be conscious. So they say that this mind, the consciousness of this mind, is the consciousness of Akal Purkh, which is reflecting and it's appearing as the mind. It's appearing to be conscious. This mind is appearing to be conscious. So ਉਹਦੇ ਕਰਕੇ ਸਾਧ ਸੰਗਤ ਜੀ, that's one meaning we can take from this. Another meaning is this, that which cannot be illumined by the mind, ਜਿਹਨੂੰ ਮਨ ਪ੍ਰਕਾਸ਼ਿਤ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰ ਸਕਦਾ, ਪਰ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮਨ ਨੂੰ ਪ੍ਰਕਾਸ਼ਿਤ ਕਰਦਾ, ਮਤੀ ਨਾਲ ਲਿਖਿਆ ਹੈ, ਜਿਹੀ ਮਤੀ ਲਿਖਿਆ ਹੈ, that which cannot be illumined by the mind, but which illumines the mind. ਇੱਦਾਂ ਵੀ ਮੰਨਿਆ ਗਿਆ ਆ, because when we think about this idea of consciousness, ਸਾਧ ਸੰਗਤ ਜੀ, consciousness in Gurbani especially has been used in the sense of light. For example, Guru Sahib say, Man tu jot saroop hai, apna mool pachan. They say that you are that jot, that you are a part and parcel of that same light of God, and recognize yourself. Oftentimes we take Gurbani, we take this idea of Gurmat to be something external. We take God to be something external. We saw today that Gurbani is talking about a God who's sitting in a seventh heaven. That God is sitting in a seventh heaven, because we live in such a society where this idea is prevalent. But when we look at Gurbani, Gurbani is talking about something very different. Gurbani is saying God isn't far, God is right here. Bhagat Ravidas ji, they actually say, Kahe Ravidas, haath pe nera. That God is more nearer to us than our hand is to our heart. So what we find from this is, Sadhu Sangat ji, the mind is something which is very internal to us, and it's internal to Gurmat. Kyunki, again, coming back to the same topic, that we take everything to be external. We think of Sikhi being something, to realize something which is external. Kisi cheez jo bahar wali cheez hai, onu janna si Sikhi mande hai. Ki Gurmat keh rahi hai, know a God. Even this idea of Brahm Gyani, we think Brahm Gyani means, a knower of God means somebody who knows something external. But no, Gurbani is talking about something which is internal. The mind is something, if we understand our true self, if we understand who we truly are, apne man nu janiye, if we understand what our mind is, we can actually understand, we can actually know what God is. So the first step to understanding what God is to understand who we truly are. Because Gurbani vich bhi kai passe aunda, even Gurbani says in many places ke jinni atma cheenya paramatma soi. If you realize who you truly are, you realize God. Atma cheen param sukh paya. If you realize the Atma, if you realize your true self, you realize who you truly are, you realize God. So Gurbani isn't something which is talking about something external. Koi baharli cheez baare gyan nahi karwa rahi Gurbani. Gurbani is talking about you. Gurbani is not something external, Gurbani is something very internal. Gurbani is trying to take us away from the world and look within. And, coming back to this same point, the same idea of looking within, there's a very beautiful story of a saint, a Sufi mystic. Her name was Sant Rabia Basri. Is tarah da naam si oda. She lived in Iran. And her story goes, कि साध संगत जी, she would wear tutte fatte kapde. She would wear these broken down clothes. Ek din ode man vich ichha aayi that why don't I sit down and try and fix these clothes? Why don't I try and restitch these clothes? So she sat down with needle and thread in hand. She started stitching. And as she was stitching, Sadhu Sangat ji, that needle fell down to the ground. And it was the evening time, the sun had set. There was no light inside the hut. But she saw a light outside. She saw a street lamp outside. So she went outside, and seeing that there was light, she started to look for that same needle which she lost in her hut outside, under that street lamp. And when she was looking for that needle, Sadhu Sangat ji, under that light, obviously she wouldn't find it because she had lost it within her hut. But she was looking for it outside. And many people saw she was searching for this needle, seeing that she was a very respectable figure, Sant si, Mahatma si, she was a great soul who had devoted her life to God. People thought, why don't we help her? So they went and started to help that lady. They started to help that Sufi mystic. Or Sant di, or Madad karan lappe. And trying to look for that needle, everyone was trying to look for that needle, but Sadhu Sangat ji, no one could find it. The ant vich kisi ne puchhiya, osi sant nu, osi bibi nu puchhiya, that where did you last see that needle? Where did you last lose that needle? वो कहंदी that I lost it in my hut. Oh yeah, I was stitching my clothes in my hut. And everyone started to burst into laughter. They said, you lost your needle inside of your hut, but you're looking for it outside. You're looking for it outside under a street lamp. Ye murkh panaya. They said, this is foolishness. That you lost it inside your hut, but you're looking for it outside. In the same way, Sadhu Sangat ji, she said to them, why are you laughing at me? Everyone does this. Who doesn't do this? Kyunki Sadhu Sangat ji, we look for that same bliss, we look for that same sukh, we look for that same thing which we experience inside. We look at sukh, let's just take this idea of bliss. We experience bliss within our mind, we experience bliss within ourselves, but we look for that same bliss outside. That thing which exists within us, we look for it outside. Okay, this is how Akal Purkh's made us. And because of this creation, Sadhu Sangat ji, the way that Akal Purkh has made this human body, this human mind, that the thing, ਜਿਹੜੀ ਚੀਜ਼ ਅੰਦਰ ਬੈਠੀ ਹੈ ਸਾਧ ਸੰਗਤ ਜੀ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਬਾਹਰ ਲੱਭਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਚੀਜ਼ ਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਅੰਦਰ ਪਾਉਣਾ ਹੈ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਬਾਹਰ ਲੱਭਦੇ ਹਾਂ in reality ਸਾਧ ਸੰਗਤ ਜੀ every single person on earth is looking for the same very thing. Everyone wants sukh, everyone wants happiness, everyone wants bliss, that bliss which is eternal. Because ਸਾਨੂੰ ਕਹੇ that I'll give you this bliss which is eternal, which will never die, ਜਿਹਦਾ ਕਦੀ ਕੋਈ ਅੰਤ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ, you would straight away take it. And if we look at the idea, if we look at the paribhasha, if we look at the meaning of mukti, the meaning of liberation which Gurbani talks about, they say sarva dukkhanaki nivritti, where all these dukhs within us, they are removed, they are gone. There is no pain, there is no suffering in life, Sadhu Sangat ji, and there's the attainment of that supreme eternal happiness. But Sadhu Sangat ji, we look for that happiness outside. ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹੀ ਸੁੱਖ ਨੂੰ ਵਿਸ਼ਿਆਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੱਭਦੇ ਹਾਂ. We look for that same sukh, we look for that same bliss outside in the world of material pleasures. We never think of going inside where we are truly experiencing that sukh. And by looking for this sukh outside, Sadhu Sangat ji, we become stuck in this cycle, this vicious cycle of sukh and dukh, of pleasure and pain. ਅਸੀਂ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਆ ਚੀਜ਼ ਮਿਲ ਜਾਵੇ ਤਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਸੰਤੁਸ਼ਟ ਹੋ ਜਾਵਾਂਗੇ. If we get this material pleasure, if we get this material object, ਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਸੁਖੀ ਹੋ ਜਾਵਾਂਗੇ. We will become pleased. ਸਾਡੇ ਹਿਰਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੋਈ ਹੋਰ ਇੱਛਾ ਉਤਪੰਨ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਊਗੀ. ਪਰ ਸਾਧ ਸੰਗਤ ਜੀ ਨਹੀਂ. Desire is like something, desire is like a fire. ਤ੍ਰਿਸ਼ਨਾ ਨੂੰ ਗੁਰਬਾਣੀ ਅੱਗ ਕਹਿੰਦੀ ਆ. It's like a fire. No matter how many desires you have, after every single desire, after attaining that desire, say for example somebody wants a Lamborghini, they go, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਮਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੱਛਾ ਉਤਪੰਨ ਹੋ ਗਈ that I want a Lamborghini, ਤੇ ਸਾਧ ਸੰਗਤ ਜੀ ਉਹ ਇੱਛਾ ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ they actually get that Lamborghini. They work hard, they make the money, they buy that Lamborghini. ਪਰ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਇੱਕ ਹੋਰ ਇੱਛਾ ਆ ਗਈ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਆ ਲੈ ਲਵਾਂ ਉਹ ਲੈ ਲਵਾਂ. Or maybe after 5 years that same Lamborghini is going to look like dust, ਕਿ 5 ਸਾਲ ਹੋ ਗਏ ਕੀਮਤ ਕੀ ਆ ਹੁਣ. So in the same way, Sadhu Sangat ji, desire is like a fire. And Gurbani says, Krishna bujja har ke naam. And this fire of desire within our mind can only be destroyed by the water of naam. Like a fire, we distinguish it by the means of water. In the same way, we can destroy this fire of desire, this mrigatrishna within our mind by the means of naam, by the means of God's name, by submerging ourselves, by dissolving our sense of I, by dissolving our mind in that ocean of prem, in that ocean of love which is God. So all these different ideas which I've covered so far, all these different things I've talked about, they all come back to the mind. Desire is something which is a part of the mind. Sukh is something which is experienced within the mind. So everything at the end comes back to this same concept of the mind. So I thought to myself, why not talk about this same very mind? Why not try and talk about this mind and what's beyond this mind? So that's why Das de man de vich ichha hoyi that rather than talking about another topic, why not let's take this concept of the mind and look within this same very concept. And again, before I go into the mind, what the mind is, what's beyond the mind, I think it's very important to understand what the importance of the mind is. Kisi bhi cheez ya, any vastu, anything in this world, if you want to truly understand it, if you want to truly appreciate it, you have to learn the importance first. Sadhu Sangat ji, Guru Sahib has given us so much. Guru Sahib has given us this naam, which has this ability to take us beyond this world, to give us this everlasting sukh. But because we don't know the mehma, because we don't know the importance of this same very naam, Sadhu Sangat ji, we are never able to truly appreciate it. We're never able to truly understand what naam is and implement it within our own lives. So Sadhu Sangat ji, I thought before going into what the mind is, trying to understand what the mind is and what's beyond the mind, it's very important to understand the importance of the mind. And if we look at Gurbani, Gurbani talks of this mind being the cause of both liberation and bondage. This liberation that we talk of, being liberated from this world, being liberated from this vicious cycle of birth and death, of pleasure and pain. This world full of opposites, of cold and heat, pleasure and pain, birth and death. Gurbani itself talks about this mind being the cause of both the liberation from this, but also being the cause of all this bondage, being the cause of all pain, being the cause of everything that we call pain, Sadhu Sangat ji, that we call pleasure, to be the mind. Because Sadhu Sangat ji, you can't have pleasure if there isn't something to experience that pleasure. And what is experiencing that pleasure is the mind. So Uday Karke, there's a very famous quote within many Mahapurushs, within many Taksals, within many Sampradayas, Ke man eva manushyanam karanam bandha mokshayoho. So they say man ev, the mind alone. Ev means alone, the mind alone. Mana eva manushyanam, for manuks, for people, for humans. It's the cause of both liberation and bondage. ਜਿਹਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਮੁਕਤੀ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਮਨ ਤੋਂ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਹੋਣੀ ਆ ਤੇ ਜਿਹਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਬੰਧਨ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਮਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੀ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਜਨਮ ਮਰਨ ਦਾ ਬੰਧਨ ਕਿੰਨੇ ਕਿੰਨੇ ਬੰਧਨ ਅਸੀਂ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਆ ਸਾਧ ਸੰਗਤ ਜੀ when we take ourselves to be far from God we fall into this bondage we fall into this trap of sansar and when we understand how near God is that God is not something far in fact God is something so near to you that you're a part of God. Kaha Kabir, Kaho Kabir hai Ram ki ansh. This is a part of Ram. This is an ansh of Ram. So, in the same way, Sadhu Sangat ji, this mind is the cause of all of this. The mind is the cause of this bondage. The mind itself is the cause of this liberation. Man ev, man hi karne man. This mind itself is the only cause. Ev da pavanda only. And not only this, but Gurbani itself talks about this. Gurbani says, Haume dir garog hai daru pi ismahe. They say Haume, Haume. Let's just take this one word of Haume and decode it. Hau means I and me also means I. Me da vi pav ahangya. Hau da vi pav ahangya. Hau da vi pav me te me da vi pav me hai. So Haume dir garog hai, this sense of ego which we call the mind. The very rudimentary, the very raw form of the mind is the sense of I. The most subtlest form of the mind is the sense of ahankar. Sabto sukham roop manda sadha sanidhi ahankarya. So they say, Haume dira garog hai. Haume itself is the chronic disease, is this bondage that we live with. All these pains, all this suffering that we see in this world is a cause of this mind. Haume dira garog hai. Daru pi ismahe. And within this same mind, within this same ego, there exists the method, the cure, the means to liberation from this cycle. So this is why, Sadhu Sangat ji, the mind is so important. The mind is the cause of both liberation and bondage. And now let's go into what the mind truly is. So jada man hai, obviously in Punjabi, when we think about the mind, we usually use the word man. In reality, Sadhu Sangat ji, all these different names in Gurbani we find as well. Punjabi bhasha vich vi buddhi nu kehne a, man vi kehne a, chit vi kehne, ahankar vi kehne a. All these different words, man, buddh, chit, ahankar, they're referring towards the same thing. Which to be very simple, we can say to be the mind. And Sadhu Sangat ji, this mind has four forms. when it does a certain action, say when the mind has a thought of attraction towards something, a thought of repulsion, हाँ जी, कोई फुरना जो किसी प्रति राग होवे, किसी प्रति द्वेष होवे, having attachment towards something, being positively attached to something and being repulsed, having these thoughts of enmity, rag dvesh. So when the mind has these thoughts of repulsion and attraction, ਉਸ ਸਮੇਂ ਤੇ ਮਨ ਬਣ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਆ. ਤੇ ਇਹਦੇ ਕਰਕੇ ਵਿਦਵਾਨ say, the great scholars say, they describe the man to be sankalpa vikalpatmakam manah. They say the man is that which is made of sankalp, made of thoughts of attraction towards something. ਕਿਸੇ ਪ੍ਰਤੀ ਰਾਗ, ਕਿਸੇ ਪ੍ਰਤੀ ਦਵੇਸ਼. Like for example, somebody might like chocolate cake and not like ice cream. ਠੀਕ ਹੈ? The thought of attraction that I like chocolate cake, that's going to be rag. But the idea that I don't like this ice cream is going to be repulsion. So these thoughts of attraction and repulsion is called the man. Sankalpa vikalpatmakam manah. ਇਹਨੂੰ ਮਨ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਜੋ ਸੰਕਲਪ ਤੇ ਵਿਕਲਪ ਦਾ ਬਣਿਆ ਹੋਵੇ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਮਨ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ. And the next form of the mind is called the buddh, the intellect. ਤੇ ਜੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹਦੀ ਵਿਉਤਪੱਤੀ ਕਰੀਏ, if we try to understand what this means, the buddhi means, they describe the buddhi means nishchayatmakam buddhi. Nishchayatmika buddhi. ਕਹਿੰਦੇ buddhi is that which is the decision making part of your mind. When you make a decision, yes or no, based upon vivek, based upon your discrimination. If someone tells you to fall off a cliff, just jump off. You're not going to do that. Why? Because you have this sense of discrimination. What is right, what is wrong. You know that after jumping off that cliff, you're going to die. So that's the discrimination which guides the intellect. The intellect, which is the part of the mind, which is the form of the mind, which is based upon decision making, which makes a decision yes or no, say ya galt. ਉਹਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਬੁੱਧੀ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਹਾਂ. And the next thing that we can say is the chit. The next form of the mind we can say is the chit. ਤੇ ਇਹਦਾ ਵੀ ਅਰਥ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਚਿੰਤਨ ਕਰਤ੍ਰਿ ਚਿੱਤਮ. That which does chintan, that which thinks. And from these thoughts, from these experiences in our life, Sadhu Sangaji, we get these mental imprints, we get these memories which become imprinted within us, which become imprinted within our mind. So that is called the chit. When these same very actions that we see in life, these same very memories, they become imprinted in our mind. The chit, based upon these memories, we are guided by the buddhi. So these memories of the chit, they are the ones which guide the buddhi, which guide the intellect towards what is right, what is wrong, towards decision making. And the fourth form of the mind, they say, is ahankar. Aham karta, ahankar. Ahankar da bhav hunda aham karta. When you take yourself to be the karta, when you think that I am doing, ਸਾਡੇ ਮਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹ ਭਾਵਨਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ. As long as you think that you're doing sadhu sangat, you're stuck in this cycle of birth and death. Jamman marna hai sansar. Gurbani says, what we call sansar is jamman marna, birth and death. And what is the cause of that? Ahankar. Home ei bandhana fir joni pahe. Home is that same bondage which causes us to be stuck in this cycle of birth and death. And this hankar, this home, can be simply defined as the sense of I, कि मैं हाँ, कि मैं करता हूँ. That's why Gurbani says to walk on this path, you have to kill this I. You have to remove this I. Until you remove this I, you can't walk on this path. You can't attain liberation. You can't attain oneness with God if you think I am doing. Like jab lag janna hai main kuch karta. As long as you think main, as long as you think that I am doing, till then you're stuck in this bondage. Jab lag janna hai main kuch karta. Tab lag garb joon mein firta. Till then you're stuck in this vicious cycle of entering the mother's womb and dying again and again and again. The Sadhu Sangat ji, these are the four forms of the mind. And the reason why I've covered them is because sometimes we think the mind is very simple. Gurbani just uses this one word, man. Ja buddhi vartali, ja mati vartali. But these words that Gurbani uses have a certain meaning. And sometimes because of English translation, we're unable to actually grasp the meaning of these terms. The man to baad Sadhu Sangat ji, the question becomes, We've already covered the idea that the mind itself is the cause of liberation and bondage. But how does the mind cause bondage? Because before we get onto the liberation part, we have to understand what Gurbani is liberating us from. What is the bondage from which Gurbani is liberating us from? And so let's try and understand how the mind causes bondage. So Sadhu Sangha, from the mind we get this sense of attachment towards a certain thing. And when we get this sense of attachment, we get this desire. And from this desire for that thing, we get karam. From attachment, there is desire, and from desire, there is karam. For example, somebody might have this desire for a certain thing, like maybe, drinking alcohol, maybe. They might have a desire to drink alcohol, and that desire manifests as an action, as a karam. And from that karam, you will have a bhog, you will have a fruit of action. You will have something which will be the bhog, which will be the fruit of that action. Koi bhi karam karde ya, karam da bhog hunda ya. Any action we do in this life will have a certain effect, which will have a certain reaction of that karam. Anything that you do, I think, even like Newton's third law, obviously, maina padhya nahi hai physics, but every action has an equal and opposite reaction. In the same way, Sadhu Sangat ji, any action you do on a spiritual level, on a metaphysical level, Sadhu Sangat, they will cause a fruit, they will cause a reaction. Every action has a reaction. And that fruit is either sukh or dukh, it's either pleasure or pain. But to actually experience that dukh, to actually experience the fruit of action, you have to have a body. ਸਰੀਰ ਤੋਂ ਬਗੈਰ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਸੁੱਖ ਜਾਂ ਦੁੱਖ ਨੂੰ ਭੋਗ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਕਦੇ. ਇਹਦੇ ਕਰਕੇ ਸਰੀਰ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਕਿਹਾ ਆ ਕਿ ਸਰੀਰ ਸਾਧਨ ਆ, ਸਰੀਰ ਮਾਧਿਅਮ ਆ, ਸਰੀਰ ਮਾਧਿਅਮ ਖਲੂ ਧਰਮ ਸਾਧਨਮ. ਸਰੀਰ ਮਾਧਿਅਮ ਆ ਜਿਹਦੇ ਦੁਆਰਾ ਅਸੀਂ ਸੁੱਖ ਜਾਂ ਦੁੱਖ ਨੂੰ ਭੋਗਦੇ ਆ, ਇਸ ਸੰਸਾਰ ਦੇ ਧਰਮਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਭੋਗਦੇ ਆ, ਸੁੱਖ ਜਾਂ ਦੁੱਖ. So what we find is that the body itself is needed to experience the fruit of action. And the fruit of action is either pleasure or pain. And if you need a body to experience that fruit, then there must be rebirth. So because of that, Sadhu Sangat ji, this same action, karam, they cause the bhog, they cause pleasure and pain. And to experience that same pleasure and pain, you need a body. That's why even karam itself, even these actions which we perform, they are also things which lead to bondage. In fact, Sadhu Sangat ji, whenever we do karam when there's this sense of I. ਜਿੱਥੇ ਮੈਂ ਭਾਵੇ, ਜਿੱਥੇ ਅਹੰਗ ਭਾਵੇ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਕਰਮ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ, ਫਿਰ ਕਰਮ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਆ. That's why ਜਿਹੜੇ ਗੁਰਮੁਖਾਂ ਨੇ ਇਹ ਅਹੰਕਾਰ ਨੂੰ ਛੱਡ ਦਿੱਤਾ, ਆਪਣੇ ਅਹੰਕਾਰ ਦਾ ਨਾਸ਼ ਕਰ ਦਿੱਤਾ, for them there is no karam. ਗੁਰਬਾਣੀ ਕਹਿੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਕਰਮ ਕਰਤ ਹੋਵੇ ਨਹਿ ਕਰਮ. ਭਾਵੇਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਪ੍ਰਤੀਤ ਹੁੰਦੇ, even though we can see those Gursikhs talking, walking, performing so many actions, because they've removed themselves from being the doer of that action, from being the person who's committing that action, because they've removed the sense of I am doing, Sadhu Sangat ji, they're not affected by karam. So that's why Gurbani says, Haumai karma kamahe. That in Haumai, because of this sense of I am doing, karam is born. But those Gursikhs which have transcended that, for them karma kart hove neh karam. ਭਾਵੇਂ ਕਰਮ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ, ਉਹ ਨਹਿ ਕਰਮ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਤੇ ਕੋਈ ਕਰਮ ਦਾ ਪ੍ਰਭਾਵ ਨਹੀਂ ਪੈਂਦਾ. ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਨੂੰ ਸਰੀਰ ਤੋਂ ਉੱਪਰ ਮੰਨ ਲਿਆ. They aren't limited by the body. And one more thing, one more, you can say, product of action of karam is mental imprint sanskar. And to give an example of this, I put a very small image of a thief right here. You can see. So this thief, let me give you an example here, Sadhu Sangat ji. There's a thief which goes and robs a home. When he robs that home, he's going to get a fruit. He's got that done. ਉਹਨੂੰ ਕਰਮ ਦਾ ਭੋਗ ਮਿਲਣਾ ਆ. And let's say for the explanation, ਅਨੁਵਾਦ ਲਈ, ਅਰਥ ਦੇ ਲਈ, let's just take the reward, the action, the fruit to be that he's got some money. He's stolen some wealth from a family. ਰਾਤ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਸੇ ਦੇ ਘਰ ਵਿੱਚ ਚਲੇ ਗਿਆ, ਚੋਰੀ ਕਰ ਲਈ, ਪੈਸਾ ਧਨ ਲੈ ਲਿਆ. He's got this money now. And Sadhu Sangat ji, that's the fruit of action. But then the other part is the mental imprint. After he's done that, he saw that nobody noticed him robbing the family. Nobody noticed ਕਿ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਘਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਚੋਰੀ ਕਰ ਲਈ, ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਲੱਗਿਆ, ਉਹਦੇ ਕਰਕੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਮਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹ ਸੰਸਕਾਰ ਬਣ ਗਿਆ. There's a mental imprint that nobody caught me, that I'll do this again. So there's a memory being built, a mental imprint, a memory being built within that person, within that thief. In the same way, Sadhu Sangha ji, any action we do, koi bhi karma karde hain, we get a mental imprint. Even this, sense of addiction to a certain object, that too is because of a mental imprint. Kyunki ਉਹਨੂੰ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਭੋਗਿਆ ਤੇ ਆਨੰਦ ਆਇਆ. Because we've experienced, for example, say smoking, say alcohol, say ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਪ੍ਰਕਾਰ ਦਾ ਰਸ ਸੰਸਾਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਭੋਗਿਆ ਆ, ਸਾਡੇ ਹਿਰਦੇ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਸਾਡੇ ਮਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸੰਸਕਾਰ ਬਹਿ ਗਿਆ. In our mind we have this mental imprint now. And because of that mental imprint, we get the desire again. And from that desire, we get the karam. From the desire to smoke. Say you've spoken before, you get a mental imprint in your mind, and then you're going to have this desire to do it again. And then that desire will itself materialize into action, into karam. So that's why Gurbani says, in this way, this mind causes bandhan, it causes bondage. Again, how does the mind cause liberation? And for this, Sadhu Sangat ji, Sadhu Sangat ji, jo man hai, jira mind hai, when we take the same very mind and we concentrate upon the Shabad of the Guru, and we listen to what the Guru is saying, and by listening to the teaching of the Guru, we kill this mind, we destroy this mind. ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਮਨ ਨੂੰ ਸ਼ਾਂਤ ਕਰ ਲੈਂਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਮਨੋ ਨਾਸ਼ ਕਰ ਲੈਂਦੇ ਹਾਂ. Then Sadhu Sangat ji, we're able to find Paramatma, we're able to purify our mind by listening, by walking, by dying upon the means of the Guru Shabad. Guru Shabad te ਤੁਰ ਕੇ, ਗੁਰੂ ਦੇ ਸਿਧਾਂਤ ਨੂੰ ਮੰਨ ਕੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਜੀਵਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਲਿਆ ਕੇ, Sadhu Sangat ji, we're able to destroy, we're able to kill this mind. ਇਸ ਮਨ ਨੂੰ ਰੋਕ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਇਸ ਮਨ ਦਾ ਨਾਸ਼ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ. And there's an example here given, the mind is like a mad elephant which is drunk with this wine, drunk with this alcohol. Which alcohol? The alcohol of I-ness, this alcohol of aham, I am, main, mera. ये जो हौमै है, जो ये ममत्व है, ममता ते हौमै, अहमत्व ममत्व, ये संस्कृत के शब्द हैं. पर to be very simple, Sadhu Sangat ji, this elephant of the mind is drunk with this wine, is drunk with this alcohol of I-ness. कि मैं कर रहा, कि मैं भोग रहा, मैं. And because of this, it's unable to realize the supreme reality. It's unable to realize the truth, which is Vaheguru. And they say, Guru Anka Samar Jivalan Hara. The Guru is the rod which controls it and shows us the way. So the Guru is the one. If we give our mind to the Guru will show us the path. The Guru will hit this mind. We're killing those voices in this mind. We're trying to make this mind shant. By listening, by understanding, by walking upon the path of Gurbani, trying to read Gurbani every day, Nityam karde hain, all these different rituals, all these different things that we're doing are done to destroy this mind. One more thing we find with the mind is, Sadhu Sangat ji, to actually control the mind, we have to remove these 3 defects of the mind. There's 3 defects according to Gurmat. According to Jede karke, we're not able to recognize the supreme reality which is Vaheguru. ਉਹਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਮਝ ਨਹੀਂ ਪਾਉਂਦੇ, ਉਹਦਾ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਬੋਧ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋ ਪਾਉਂਦਾ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਇਹ 3 ਦੋਖ ਸਾਡੇ ਹਿਰਦੇ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਨੇ, ਸਾਡੇ ਮਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਨੇ. ਤੇ ਕਿਹੜਾ worry about these terms, these terms are just there. But the main thing is about grasping the tat. So Sadhu Sangat ji, ਇੱਥੇ ਪਹਿਲਾ ਹੈ ਮਲ. So mal is this, janam janam ki is man ka mal lagi kala hua siya ho. From so many lifetimes, our mind has been in activity with all of this mail. Gurbani ਕਹਿੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਭਰੀ ਹੈ ਮਤ ਪਾਪਾਂ ਕੈ ਸੰਗ ਉਹ ਧੋਪੈ ਨਾ ਵੈ ਕੇ ਰੰਗ. ਜਿੰਨੇ ਵੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਪਾਪ ਕੀਤੇ ਨੇ ਪੂਰਵ ਜਨਮਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਸਾਧ ਸੰਗਤ ਜੀ, ਉਹ ਜਿੰਨੇ ਵੀ ਸਾਰੇ ਪਾਪ ਨੇ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਜੋ ਮੈਲ ਹੈ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਮਲ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ. ਸੋ ਜਨਮ ਜਨਮ ਕੀ ਇਸ ਮਨ ਕਾ ਮਲ ਲਾਗੀ ਕਾਲਾ ਹੁਆ ਸਿਆ ਹੋ. Sadhu Sangat ji, this mind has become black, pitch dark, pitch black. So that's the first one, mal. And the second we find shape. And Sadhu Sangat ji, shape di je ਅਸੀਂ ਵਿਚਾਰ विक्षेप नूं कहंदे आ आकाश आदि प्रपंचोत्पत्ति हेतु विक्षेप शक्ति. And obviously, this is a Sanskrit meaning derived of vikshep. There's no need to worry about this. It might seem a bit complex, but it's simple here. Vikshep is that power of Maya, power of illusion. Akal Purukh has a certain force, he has a certain Shakti, he has a certain potency by which he projects the world. And that potency of projection, that power of Akal Maya, Maya, when we see this world, when we see all these different material pleasures, these material objects, our mind becomes chanchal, our mind becomes distracted, it starts wavering, it's unable to be concentrated. That, ਜਦੋਂ ਵੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਬੈਠਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਧਿਆਨ ਕਰਨ ਨੂੰ, ਹੁਣ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਕਰੀ ਜਾਈਏ ਅਸੀਂ, if we're talking, but ਜੇ ਕੋਈ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਕਹੇ 5 ਮਿੰਟ ਬਹਿ ਕੇ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਦਾ ਧਿਆਨ ਕਰੋ, ਆਪਣੇ ਮਨ ਨੂੰ ਇਕਾਗਰ ਕਰੋ, we can't do that. ਉਹ ਕਿਉਂ? ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਵਿਕਸ਼ੇਪ, ਸਾਡਾ ਮਨ ਵਿਕਸ਼ਿਪਤ ਆ, our mind is chanchal because of this projected world. And what is this world projected by? Vikshep, by the power of vikshep, which is of Maya. Maya da jo roop hai vikshep, the power of illusion, the power of projection that Maya holds, that Akal Purukh's potency holds, that is the one which causes the wavering of the mind, which causes our mind to be distracted. Agla kehndे ne avaran. Avaran is that power of Maya, is that power of Akal Purukh's Shakti, Akal Purukh's potency, that power of illusion. It conceals reality, it conceals the truth. We think God is far. Why? Because of this avaran. Avaran de karke sanu e prateet hunda ya. We think that we're far from God, that God is something far. We forget that we're one with God. Sagar mein hai boond, boond mein hai sagar. Like a droplet is in the ocean and the ocean is in the droplet. In the same way, Sadhu Sangat Ji, we are different from Akal Purakh, but this sense of I, this sense of mind, this sense of man, that is stopping us from understanding that. And that man is shown in the form of avarn. Jo ye avarn shakti ya, Maya di, ode karke sanu ye agyan ya. We think that we're separate from God. We think of a duality. In reality, there's only God. Brahma di sai, Brahma suniya, ek vikhani hai. वास्तविकता ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸੰਸਾਰ ਸੰਗਤ ਜੀ ਕੇਵਲ ਬ੍ਰਹਮ ਹੀ ਆ, ਕੇਵਲ ਪਰਮਾਤਮਾ ਹੀ ਆ, ਸਭ ਗੋਬਿੰਦ ਹੈ, ਸਭ ਗੋਬਿੰਦ ਹੈ, ਗੋਬਿੰਦ ਬਿਨ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੋਈ. In this world there's nothing other than God. But the thing which limits us, the thing which stops us, the thing which conceals this reality, ਉਹਨੂੰ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ avaran. And the meaning which is given of avaran is na asat. Na asat. So na sat, na prakashate iti vivahara hetu avarana shakti. Na sat. We think that God doesn't exist. We think that Akal Purakh doesn't exist, that Akal Purakh isn't everywhere. Akal Purakh isn't manifest as this universe. Why? Because of this avaran. Iti vyavahara hetu. Eho je vyavahar da jo karan ya. Ke Parmeshwar hai nahi, ke Parmeshwar sare paase prakashman nahi. Oh kyun hai? Kyunki avaran karke, avaran shakti karke. Na sat, na prakashate iti vyavahara hetu avarana shakti. Inu avarana shakti kende ya. This is called the power of concealment, which stops us from realizing our unity with God, how close God is to us. And now the thing comes, how do we remove this dosh? How do we remove these dosh, these defects from our mind? For the first, for the mal, for the sinful activity, for all the pap, all these mental imprints, because of this pap, ਇਹ ਜਨਮ ਜਨਮ ਕੀ ਇਸ ਮਨ ਕਉ ਮੱਲਾ ਕੀ, ਜੋ ਇਹ ਮਨ ਦੀ ਮੈਲ ਹੈ ਇਹਨੇ ਜਨਮਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਜੋ ਇਹ ਮਲ ਹੈ ਸਾਧ ਸੰਗਤ ਜੀ, ਇਹਨੂੰ ਹਟਾਉਣ ਲਈ ਮਹਾਂਪੁਰਖ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਨਿਸ਼ਕਾਮ, perform action without desire for fruit. So what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is कि साध the fruits of that action, try and put those fruits in the feet of Paramatma. And when you do this, Sadhu Sangat Ji, every single action that you do becomes an act of devotional service. Bhagati ban janda. ਜੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਨਿਸ਼ਕਾਮਤਾ ਦੇ ਦੁਆਰਾ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਕਰਮ ਕਰੀਏ ਸਾਧ ਸੰਗਤ ਜੀ, ਤੇ ਉਹ ਕਰਮ ਭਗਤੀ ਬਣ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਨੇ. Even sleep becomes ਭਗਤੀ. ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਸਾਧ ਸੰਗਤ ਜੀ, when you go to sleep, you might say, Hey Akal Purakh, I'm sleeping. Why? because I'm trying to repair my body, I'm trying to regain strength so I can engage in your bhakti, so I can engage in your devotional service. You know, even if you're working, you can take your work and say, I'm working, why? Because I'll make some money. Why do I want money? So I can have a nice home. Why do I want a nice home? So I can sit in that very home and do bhakti of Paramatma. So, when you do any action with nishkamata, जब ਅਸੀਂ ਨਿਸ਼ਕਾਮਤਾ ਦੇ ਦੁਆਰਾ ਨਿਸ਼ਕਾਮਤਾ ਦੇ ਯੁਕਤ ਸਹਿਤ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਕਰਮ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਸਾਧ ਸੰਗਤ ਜੀ ਤਦ ਫਿਰ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਕਰਮ ਭਗਤੀ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਨੇ. So in this way, by performing nishkam karm, karm kart hove neh karm, even though we're performing action, those fruits of that action don't affect us. And the next one they say is vikshep nu kidda mitauna. And as we discussed, vikshepata is the chanchalta, is the waveringness of the mind. Our mind is sometimes here, kali idhar ya, kali udhar ya. Kali tikde nahi sada man. Sada man har samay chanchal ya. And Gurbani says, chaturai na chaturpuj paiye. Because of this chanchalta, or chaturai, we can't attain Paramatma. So the method to alleviate this is meditation, is devotion. Whenever we sit down trying to reflect upon the Naam of Paramatma, when we chant the name of God, Sadhu Sanghaji, we're acting in meditation. We're acting in the act of meditation. ਅਸੀਂ upasana ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ. Tedi upasya. We're performing meditation of the object of meditation, which is God, which is Vaheguru, by the means of Naam. So when we sit down doing bhakti, upasana ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਧਿਆਨ ਧਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ. When we sit down and place our focus on Akal Purkh, be it through Naam, sitting down, trying to close your eyes, imagining the Naam that you're chanting, be it Vaheguru, Vaheguru, ਅਸੀਂ ਜਪ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ, chanting Vaheguru, trying to imagine the word of Vaheguru in our mind, and trying to focus, trying to put our concentration upon the sound of Vaheguru. That is a form of dhyan, and that dhyan we can call upasana. So by continuously abhyas karde hoye, abhyas karde, by repetition, by continuously performing this meditation, Sadhu Sangat Ji, this waveringness of the mind, this chanchalta of the mind can be stopped. And after these two are removed, Sadhu Sangat Ji, the last which is left is avaran, the concealment of reality. And this is only removed when we have Guru Prasad, when the Guru does kirpa, Gyan Anjana Gurdiya, when the Guru gives us Gyan, when he gives us this wisdom, this self-knowledge, this realization of Paramatma, ਇਹ ਉਦੋਂ ਹੀ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਜਦ ਗੁਰੂ ਪ੍ਰਸਾਦ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਆ. ਰਾਮ ਮਇਆ ਸਤ ਗੁਰਦਇਆ ਸਾਧ ਸੰਗ ਜਬ ਹੋਏ. The Sadhu Sangat Ji, when we sit in the Sadhu Sangat today, like we're sitting here today, we're sitting in the congregation of Gurmukhs, in the congregation of devotees, we're sitting here today, that is the first ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ. ਜਦੋਂ ਕੋਈ ਸਾਡੇ ਪੁਰਾਣੇ ਕਰਮ ਜਾਗਦੇ ਆ, when Akal Purkh does his kirpa upon association of Gurmukhs, and when the Sadguru does kirpa especially, ਸਾਨੂੰ ਹੁਣ ਰਾਮ ਦੀ ਕਿਰਪਾ ਹੋਗੀ, ਪਰਮੇਸ਼ਰ ਦੀ ਕਿਰਪਾ ਹੋਗੀ, ਸਾਧ ਸੰਗਤ ਵੀ ਮਿਲ ਗਈ. But without the Guru's kirpa, there's nothing. ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਗੁਰੂ ਉਹ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਗਿਆਨ ਅੰਜਨ ਗੁਰ ਦੀਆ, ਅਗਿਆਨ ਅੰਧੇਰ ਬਿਦਾਸ. The Guru is the one who gives us this mascara of gyan, by which we're able to see the world as God. We're able to experience God every single second, every single minute. We're able to see God. We're able to live in that experience of Ananda. We're able to live in that experience of true bliss. The Sadhu Sangat Ji, before ਅਸੀਂ ਸਮਾਪਤੀ ਕਰੀਏ, I thought, you know, there's many questions which come in our mind, है ना? And obviously we're talking about the mind, so there's obviously going to be questions regarding the mind. And there's one very big question which somebody might ask, that you've purified the mind now, but Sadhu Sangat Ji, can the mind then be tainted again? Can the mind be stained again? ਹੁਣ ਮਨ ਸ਼ੁੱਧ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ, ਨਿਸ਼ਕਾਮ ਕਰਮ ਕਰ ਲਿਆ, ਉਪਾਸਨਾ ਕਰ ਲਈ, ਗਿਆਨ ਮਿਲ ਗਿਆ. You've performed selfless action, you've performed acts of meditation repetitively, and now by the kirpa of the Guru, this wisdom of the self, this self-realization has occurred. The realization of Paramatma has occurred. Can this mind now be tainted again? They say no. Gurbani says, Gyan ratan man majya bahurana mela hoye. If we take our mind and by the means of Gyan wash this mind, by the means of the wisdom given by the Guru, the spiritual wisdom, the realization of Paramatma given by the Guru, then Sadhu Sangat Ji kadi fir wapas this vessel, a man kadi fir wapas ganda nahi hunda. And Sadhu Sangat Ji, to do samapti of this talk, let's try and take this Sikhya, let's try and understand that sucha pada sach samavai. ਜੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਮਨ ਨੂੰ ਸਾਫ਼ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਫਿਰ ਹੀ ਸੱਚ ਟਿਕ ਪਾਵੇਗਾ. If we take our mind and purify our mind, only then can the Sach, can the supreme reality, which is Vaheguru, which is Parameswar, which is Paramatma, be attained. If we clean our mind. And Sadhu Sangat Ji, ਇੱਥੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਦਾਸ ਆਪਣੀ ਬੇਨਤੀ ਸਮਾਪਤ ਕਰਦਾ ਆ. Thank you, to all the Sangat, to all the Gurmukhs which have allowed me. ਹਾਂਜੀ ਕੋਈ ਨਹੀਂ ਬਾਬਾ ਜੀ ਇੱਥੇ ਸਮਾਪਤੀ ਕਰ ਲੈਂਦੇ ਆ. ਤੇ ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ ਟੂ ਦ ਸਾਧ ਸੰਗਤ, ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ ਟੂ ਗਿਆਨੀ ਜੀ as well ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਸਮਾਂ ਬਖਸ਼ਿਆ. ਐਂਡ there's been many mistakes which have occurred. ਇੱਥੇ ਆਪਣੀ ਮਾਂ ਜੀ ਸਮਤ ਬਖਸ਼ਣ, ਕਿਰਪਾ ਕਰਨ. ਇੱਥੇ ਆਪਣੀ ਬੇਨਤੀ ਸਮਾਪਤ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ. ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ.